Hello chaps, I hope you're all well. It's quite quiet at the moment, so we'll do a quick chat. I want to talk today about gender as a proxy for sex. Now, before we get there, please remember, we do need your money, so please go onto one of the subscription sites, the donation sites, whatever, you've got the list, and send us a little something. Doesn't have to be a lot, just a couple of beers. Always help. Buy a coffee. Just buy a coffee. Right, now, gender is a proxy for sex. Now, I was prompted to think over this because, and it led to a very, very important discovery, I have to say. I was prompted to think over this because I was looking through Twitter, my Twitter feed, and anyway, some guy had said, he's a nice guy, and he's a smart man, and he said that gender is not a proxy for sex, and I went, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. Obviously gender is a proxy for sex. And so I corrected him, obviously, and so let me explain it to you. Gender is the basis of the human mating system. I'm amazed that I have to explain this. You know, it's so bloody obvious. Everybody should know this. Gender is the basis of our mating strategies. Masculine goes with feminine. Feminine goes with masculine. I'm sorry, the like with like thing invented by the new gay man in the 1960s, no, it's not real. It's a fake. In the real world, masculine opposites attract. Opposites attract. So what is the proxy thing? Well, I've used the term promise in the past, but I actually think proxy is a better one. Feminine gender is a proxy for an available vagina, right? It's a promise of an available vagina. You cannot tell what the state of estrus is of a human female just by looking at her. And we don't have sensitive enough noses to be able to smell when she's in estrus, right? The point here is reproduction. Sex is about reproduction, right? So human females, because they wear clothes and they stood up, that's the really most important one. When we stood up, you couldn't see by looking at a woman's vulva whether she was in estrus or not. No clue. So what would they do? They adopted mannerisms that would attract men, that would suggest, you know, actually I possess an available vagina and I want you to come and get it. And that went on for millions of years. And in fact, we developed things that other animals don't have. No other primate has boobs. What's boobs all about? They're just fat. And all the other animals have perfectly functioning glands, you know, that produce milk. I don't see chimpanzees' mothers having any problem feeding their babies. So what's with the 30 double D knockers? It attracts men. I mean, this is so fucking basic, you know. It attracts men. Men have evolved to like what women are proposing as the proxy. You know, you look at the curvy shape, the boobs, the hair, the neotenous features. Chimpanzees don't have neotenous features. If you look at male chimpanzees' faces and female chimpanzees' faces, they look the same. But you can nearly always tell, looking at a picture of a human, whether that human is male or female. That's gender, right? They didn't choose it. They didn't put it on in the morning, you know, oh, today I think I'll be a sexy woman, you know, and tomorrow I think I'll just be a man. That is not how it works. It's a mating strategy. Feminine gender is a proxy for an available vulva, a vagina. Why is that necessary? That's necessary because, like all mammals, human females keep their ova, their eggs, deep inside them, right? They can't just leave them lying around the riverbed or, you know, in a hole in the ground and hope some male will come along and fertilize them. They have to actually attract a man in to get inside them and fertilize the eggs. And for these reasons, sex in humans is many things. It is extremely long protracted. Most animals, sex is over in seconds. And yeah, I know that's the case for some men, but that's not what we're discussing here. Men can train themselves, and humans can train themselves to go on with sex for, you know, 15 or 20 minutes without any real difficulty. It's not so hard. You just think of your tax return and no problem. So all of these things are part of gender, and it exists for two reasons. First of all, to get the sperm into where the eggs are. That's really critical. The second part is also important, which is the females, women, need to keep the men around to help them look after the kids. Because human babies take, a dozen, 13, 14 years until they're actually viable enough to look after themselves. There is no point in you having babies if those babies die at the age of 6. No point. Total waste of effort. They have to get to the point where they can have babies for you to have done your reproductive work. Okay? So, feminine gender attracts men into the available vagina that is promised, and it also keeps them there by saying, look, you got this thing here, that's, and you know how good it is, and I'm really good at using it, so you don't want to be mucking me about because, I'm your supply. And then women do all sorts of other things like ensuring that other women can't encroach on that and stuff like that. They invented marriage. All of gender, don't believe feminists. Feminists wouldn't know what to do with their time if they weren't lying. Gender was invented by women, by females, in order to attract males, and keep them in a bonded relationship. It all comes from women. So, gender in this context is a proxy. It's a promise. Feminine gender is a proxy, a promise, for a vagina and all the other delights of the female body. Masculine gender is the opposite. It promises an erect penis capable of doing the job. But it also promises other things. It promises ability to look after the woman. It promises strength. It promises aggression so that she can be protected. It promises ability to provide for her. These things all come from masculine gender, and they're designed there to act as attractors to females, because that's what they want. Men want sex, females want power, and they want protection. So that led me to thinking about something else, which was really quite important. And I thought, this is really so interesting. I wonder if there's anything else that acts as a proxy. Now, something that has caused a great deal of thought, not just by me, but by many, and most of it really erroneous. It's like, how could you possibly think anything so damn stupid, type of erroneous, about men who are attracted to trans women? Now, I'm not talking about, the Jeeps, the AGPs, who, frankly, in the West, it's really quite unusual to find a Jeep who is even passively attractive to a man. I mean, it's like, men who go with those. However, there are some who transition in their teenage who, start taking the hormones, they suppress their masculinity, and by the time they're 24, they can be pretty damn good looking, They can be attractive to men. And remember, gender is all about attraction. There's another type, of course, which is the HSTS, and they tend to start off being, if they're male, they tend to start off being much more naturally pretty, smaller, finer boned, attractive, and, dare I say it, feminine. So what is the attraction that brings a man to want to have one of them as a sexual partner? Because he can't reproduce with her. You can't do it. It's not possible. She doesn't have that vagina that is the promise. And of course, that causes a great deal of problems, because girls get into positions where, they've got this randy guy who's had a few drinks, and they get to the room and it's like, pants are down, and he goes, what the blazes is that thing? And it can get nasty, so I don't ever do that. Always make sure the guy knows in advance what is going on. But there are some men who really do, who will go, yeah, okay, fine. You got one of those, not a problem. Why is that happening? How can that be related to the proxy context of the masculine and feminine gender structure? And when we do that, that's really interesting, because it actually suggests that we do have a third gender here. We might even have a fourth, but we'll just deal with the third one here. I think that what happens here is that the men attracted to trans women, HSTS trans women, the pretty ones, okay? In the first place, they're attracted to femininity. Nearly all the men I know who are like this are just as attracted to women as they are to ladyboys or trans women, HSTS trans women. There's no real difference in their approach. It's like, well, they're girls too, different kind of girl, and they might like some of the slightly different things about ladyboys. They might be a little taller, a little bit more slender. They might like those kitten-like hips. I do. And, these are attractors, these are proxy. But what are they a proxy for? Because these men are not submissive in sex. They're dominant in sex. They want to penetrate. But it's a question of what they want to penetrate. And what they want to penetrate is the anus. In the minds of these men, the anus becomes the sexual organ of their erotic targets. And a feminine body, which also has a penis, is a proxy for that available anus, for saying, there's no question about this one. We're not going to have to negotiate for weeks about whether or not she's prepared to take it in the rear. This one, that's where she's going. That's where we're going with this one, and there's no doubt. There's no confusion in anybody's mind here. This is about a particular way of having sex, which is very pleasant. You know, if you haven't tried it, well, you can't speak. But it is actually very pleasant. So what I think is happening here is that the classic transsexual, you know, and this might apply to some other unmasculine male forms too, is offering the promise, you know, when they're really, really feminine, is offering the promise of this available sexual organ. But it's not the vagina, it's the anus. I don't know why it is that some men are so fascinated by the anus. I know I am. I always have been. You know, I was always very frustrated that I couldn't get women to talk them into it, you know. Very nice when they do. I knew some girls, that's female girls, that were quite into it. Some weren't, you know. Some are, some aren't. So it is. Depends, I think, a little bit on how adventurous they are, and also whether they really trust you. You know, they have to really, really trust you because they think it's going to hurt. And it can hurt. I mean, I have it on reliable authority that it can really hurt if the guy is insensitive or, you know, harsher. You know, he doesn't realise that you're going to take it very easy. You know, certainly at first, we're going to take it so easy. Just so that nobody gets, you know, screaming here. We don't want screaming, you know, we don't want blood. We don't want any of that stuff. We just want pleasure. So I think what happens is that these men, and they do seem to be quite a large subset of men, there's not that much study done on this, but recent statistics suggest that maybe 30 or 40% of men in the USA have had anal sex with a woman. It's quite a lot of men. When you think about it, you know, that's maybe 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10, nearly half. That's a significant population. That's a significant number of guys that's what they really want. And if you're into that, then the thing is that the vagina actually becomes a little bit like a distraction. You know, because most female women will say, well, you know, I've got a vagina, that's good enough. And, you know, that's, you know, and it is, it's lovely. Don't get me wrong, it is lovely. I'm not insulting you here, girls, but if the guy is looking for the back door, the girl might well be saying, well, why do you want that when I've got this at the front? You know, and then the next thing you know, you've got two parties sitting on the edge of the bed with their backs to each other being in a huff. This never happens with a ladyboy. And I'm talking about HSTS here. They are the receptive ones. I don't know how many percentage, but well over 90% of HSTS are sexually receptive. They're submissive in sex. They want to be penetrated, and they love being penetrated anally. Some don't. Some got hurt, and that kind of put them off. What they need is a very sensitive, very, very caring lover to repair all the damage. And you can do it. I mean, I have been in that position. You can do it. Just by being, you know, being so sweet and nice and gentle, and just never ever, you know, forcing the issue. Don't ever do that. Most of these girls, actually, they absolutely love anal sex. They love the sensations they get from being penetrated. It's like, wow, you know, and you can tell when one of these girls has climaxes. I mean, it really is shooting star stuff. It's, you know, the whole body's shaking, the legs are all over the place. That you know. If she's a loud one, she'll be screaming the house down. And the quiet ones will be just grunting, you know. It's quite an erotic sensation for the guy too, you know. I mean, it's quite nice to have your partner doing that on the end of your what's it, you know. And you're going, boy, that must feel like something else, that must, you know. And I did it, which is, you know, pure male gratification, you know. It's like, yeah, look what I made her do. She's bouncing off the walls. Yes. We're very, very shallow. Men are so shallow, it's unbelievable. But you know where I'm going with this. So I'm sort of interested in pursuing this idea that there is something distinctive about homosexual, transsexuals, trans women, highly feminine trans woman, but there is something that is actually a proxy. Similarly to the feminine proxy is a proxy for a vagina, but this is a proxy for an anus. It's like, that's what you want. And I don't think we've proved this. I mean, I've just been thinking about it today. If you go to other parts of the world, this idea of the receptive feminine male, it's got a sort of fits a perfect model, you know, and you can see them. You walk them down the street and there they are. They're quite easy to recognise actually once you know what you're looking for. It just depends on how much silicone they've put in already. But if they're natural, they'll be quite svelte, I think is the word. And beautiful with the soft skin and beautiful faces and all of that stuff. And a guy who's into this thing, it's exactly the same as what happens when you see a beautiful woman. You know, in fact, they are the same, you know. It's just like, ding. Potential target. Your erotic target locating system is instantly triggered, you know, and it's like, oh, she's nice. You know, I wonder if she's busy this evening, you know, and you may pursue it. And I have certainly found myself talking to guys over the years, and there's a few years now, that most men who are into pursuing, you know, HSTS trans women are just as happy with women. They love women. It's like, yeah, we love women, they're great, you know. And they have absolutely no problem with you know, either penetrating a vagina or licking a vagina or any of that stuff. It's all like, yeah, that's cool. That's nice. I like it. There is that something about the anus though. And I don't think it's only physical. I think it goes beyond that. I remember talking to a guy, several guys actually, and some have even said this in public, you know, that what was it that really attracted to you to having sex like this? And they just said, well, you know, it just feels so wrong. It just feels so wrong that it feels fantastic. And you have to understand that all men are little boys. We're all naughty little boys, especially in bed. And this is like, you know, this is the kind of sex you're not supposed. Mummy doesn't want you to have this kind of sex, so let's go for it. Let's go for it. Let's do it. You know, that's what men are like. It's like, yeah, you know, I get here this thing that's completely taboo. Yeah, I love it. Men are naughty boys, or they're very, very boring. You can have your choice, but all interesting men are extremely naughty boys. And having read very widely over my life and spoken to many, many men, and a lot of them being serious adventurers, I can tell you, all the guys that you would want to know, right, are naughty boys. The ones that you just don't want to know, it's like, oh, you are such a flipping bore. I'm going to go and, you know, go to the next pub, you know. You know, they're the non-naughty ones. It's like, oh, forget it, they're not interesting. But the interesting men, the men who have something to say, something to write, who've had lives that, you know, are interesting. You go, wow, you did what? You did all that stuff? And those are adventurers. And you'll often find that those particular adventurers are also into this kind of sex, which means they're into trans women. You know, because that's the proxy. The proxy for anal sex is a trans woman, right? Because they're not gay. These are not homosexual men. They're not going to get, there's absolutely no way they're going to get into bed with some horrible, hairy, sweaty bloke. It isn't going to happen. And it's not internalized homophobia. It's a simple fact that they don't like men. In that context, I mean, sure, they'd like to go fishing with them and drink a beer with them, but no, they're not sexually attracted to men at all, but they do like anus, right? So what are you going to do? And you know, these men, they're not uncommon. They're not uncommon at all. They're everywhere, but they tend to be unconventional. Definitely tend to be unconventional. Anyway, that was what I was thinking about today, this idea of proxies. And yes, absolutely, gender is a proxy for sex. But interestingly, that led me into this idea that maybe if you like, transgender or ladyboy gender, like trans woman gender, trans femininity, there we go, trans femininity, is a proxy for something else, which is anal sex. You know, as I said, I was going to say, I'll just finish up here. Outside of the West, which is weirder, almost no trans women have operations. They're all walking about with cocks on. Why? It's because what the men that they want What those men actually want is the anus. And they're not interested in the, well, not particularly interested in the vagina. I mean, why bother? I mean, you could go down the street here and they're queuing up to jump on it. Natal women, I mean. It's just not a problem, you know, and that is the case in most parts of the world. There's loads and loads and loads of women who are just very happy to have sex with men. Maybe give them dinner, whatever, you know. But the men who want the special, you know, the special service, they're looking for something a little bit different. And they're looking, you know, the easiest way to it is to identify the ladyboys and pursue them. Because you're on a sure thing. There's not going to be any argument about where it's going, right? She knows exactly what she has to do. And they are usually very, very good at it. And men love it. Men just love it. So I think that's an interesting thing. I think that you might actually have this idea of a kind of a third gender, or maybe even four genders. That you have masculinity, femininity, trans-femininity, and trans-masculinity. But really, trans-masculinity, I don't really know anything about. Sorry. Not very much anyway. So I would leave that to one of my colleagues and friends to maybe do something on that side of it. But certainly trans-femininity, when it's looked at as being a proxy, and the proxy is for anal sex, as opposed to other forms of sex, then yeah, that does work. It does work. You know, it's maybe not the traditional understanding of what gender is, but it definitely does actually match to what you can see, which is what we're always trying to do, is to find explanations that work. So anyway, thank you very much for listening. Another one where you saw my geggy. I might try and cut it with some girls for this one, just to keep you entertained. Okay, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Bye bye.